The sound was sharp, sudden. Metal twisting. Glass shattering. Then silence, so thick it felt unreal. He opened his eyes slowly, the world around him a blur of smoke, flames, and flickering lights. His body ached, but he could move. He sat up, coughing, dazed, blood on his hands that might not have been his. There were voices in the distance. Shouts. Sirens. Names being called out. Some screamed, others whispered in panic. But not his. No one called his name. No one asked, "Is he okay?" No one ran toward him. He stumbled forward, confused. Emergency workers rushed past him, lifting others, wrapping them in blankets. People were crying, hugging, praying. He stood there, forgotten in the chaos. His ears rang. His vision blurred. Someone handed him water. Another touched his shoulder and said, "Just wait here, help is coming." But still, no one said his name. He looked around. A crushed car to his left. A burned seatbelt. He remembered sitting there. Or did he? Was that his? His thoughts were tangled. Everything felt wrong. His breath grew heavy, his chest tight. He searched faces, hoping one would light up with recognition. None did. They were counting survivors, matching names, marking off lists. His name wasn't spoken. Not once. He wanted to shout, "I'm here," but the words wouldn't come. Maybe because deep down, he wasn't sure what name to say. Something inside him felt missing. Like a part of his life had been sealed away behind the smoke. The world around him kept moving. But for him, time stood still. Something had broken. And it wasn't just the wreckage. He survived the crash. That much was clear. But as the night dragged on, one thing became terrifyingly certain. No one remembered who he was. That morning had started like any other. His alarm buzzed at 7:15. He hit snooze twice. The sunlight pushed through the curtains, warming the floor just like always. He stretched, yawned, checked his phone. A few unread messages. A voice note from his fiancée. She was already out, telling him not to forget the groceries. He smiled. She always reminded him, even when he never forgot. He got ready like clockwork. Coffee brewing. Music playing low in the background. He danced a little while brushing his teeth. On the way out, he paused to snap a quick photo in the mirror. Jacket sharp. Hair good. A normal day. At work, his desk was messy in that way he liked, organized chaos. His coworker tossed a paper ball at him, laughing about a bet they made the day before. He replied with a smirk and a sarcastic line they'd been using for years. It was all routine, all familiar. His life was full. People knew him. He belonged. During lunch, he stepped outside to call his mom. She didn't answer, but he left a message. Told her he'd visit next week. She'd love that. She always got excited when he brought her flowers, even if they were the cheap kind. He promised her he'd bring some this time too. Then he called his best friend. They talked about a game they planned to watch. Laughed about the same joke twice. The friend teased him about proposing soon. He joked back, but they both knew it was happening soon. Everything was in place. By evening he was on the road. Same route. Same playlist. Same smile on his face. Nothing felt strange. Nothing warned him. Not even a whisper that in just moments everything would be gone. The sound came first, a screech so loud it sliced through his music. Then the jolt. Tires screaming. A blinding light. And suddenly nothing. Just darkness, heavy and silent. When he opened his eyes, the world felt far away. Everything moved in slow motion. Sirens wailed in the distance, but nearby it was eerily quiet. The road was torn. Metal twisted into unnatural shapes. Smoke curled into the sky. He was lying in the grass, not sure how he got there. His body throbbed, but he was alive. People ran past him. Medics. Bystanders. No one stopped. He tried to speak, but choked on the dust in his throat. He looked toward the wreck. His car, was crushed. Flames danced along the hood. The smell of gasoline burned his nose. Someone shouted a list of names. People rushed toward survivors, crying, calling out. He waited for anyone to call his. But no one did. No one came. At the hospital, The beeping machines and bright lights offered no comfort. He had no ID. His phone was shattered. His memory, a blur. He couldn't recall his last name. Not even his own face felt familiar in the mirror. Nurses asked questions he couldn't answer. They said he had no serious physical injuries. He was lucky. But he didn't feel lucky. He felt erased. No family arrived. No friends. No one at all. Days passed. His room stayed quiet. He watched other patients get visited, hugged, remembered. He just sat there, waiting for a face he knew, a voice he recognized, a hand to reach for his. But all he saw were strangers. And with each hour that passed, the silence around him got heavier, like even the world had forgotten he existed. He stared at the ceiling for hours, hoping something would click. A memory, a voice, a name, anything. But his mind stayed blank, like a page torn from a book. Every time he tried to remember, it slipped through his fingers like water. The doctors gave him a clipboard with names. Survivors, victims, people identified. He scanned the list, line by line. None of them felt familiar. He tried to force a connection, anything that would make his heart jump or his stomach twist. But there was nothing. It was like reading a phone book from a town he'd never been to. A nurse offered to help. She asked him questions, simple ones. Do you remember where you were going? What's your favorite food? Do you know what day it is? He shook his head each time. Her smile was kind, but it faded with each answer. The police came. They showed him photos of the wreckage. One of the cars didn't have any registration. It was his. But there was no record of it. No plate, no insurance, no trace. It was as if both the car and its driver had fallen out of the sky. He looked in the mirror again. His face was unfamiliar. The shape of his nose. The color of his eyes. The scar above his eyebrow. He touched it, trying to find meaning in something he didn't remember getting. News channels covered the crash. Names rolled across the bottom of the screen. Families held photos of loved ones. Tearful reunions. Memorials. But he wasn't in any story. He wasn't in any headline. And slowly, a question grew louder in his mind. If no one knows your name, do you still exist? He watched the sun rise from his hospital bed, but it felt meaningless. Another day of silence. Another day without answers. Nurses came and went, polite but distant. They called him sir, or the unidentified male. Never by name, because there wasn't one. He was released after 2 weeks. Physically fine. Mentally shattered. They gave him clothes, a bus pass, a referral for counseling. He stepped outside, and the world looked the same, but he didn't belong in it. Every street felt unfamiliar. Every face passed without a second glance. He wandered through the city like a shadow, sat on park benches, ate in cheap diners, slept in shelters. No one asked questions. No one looked twice. He blended in because there was nothing to stand out. One night, he stood in front of a mirror in a public restroom, staring at himself under harsh fluorescent light. He tried saying names aloud, random ones, to see if any felt right. David, Marcus, James. Nothing. Each one sounded like a stranger, like a mask that didn't fit. He watched people laugh together at cafes, hug outside train stations, talk on their phones with someone waiting on the other end. He had no one waiting, no one looking. He walked into a police station, hoping someone had filed a report that somewhere out there, a mother, a sister, a friend had said, he's missing. But there was nothing. No match. Not in any system. No records. No fingerprints. No past. He wasn't just forgotten. It was like he had been erased. And in that quiet, terrifying emptiness, he began to wonder if he had meant anything to anyone at all. He started keeping a notebook. Blank pages, slowly filled with moments, fragments, really. A smell that made his chest tighten. A song that brought a sudden ache. A memory of laughter on a balcony. But no face, no voice, no location. Just feelings, sharp and sudden, like echoes from a life he couldn't reach. He drew symbols he didn't understand. A small bird. A red door. The shape of a key. Were they real memories or dreams? He didn't know, but he clung to them. They were all he had. Sometimes he'd wake up in the middle of the night with a name on his lips, but by morning it would be gone, like it had slipped into the shadows before he could hold it. A name that felt warm, familiar, someone who once meant everything. He started visiting places that felt close, parks, libraries, stations, hoping that something would spark, that a scent, a sound, or a face might unlock a part of him. But every time, he left with nothing, just more questions and the same aching silence. At night, he talked to himself, softly, trying to remember how his own voice used to sound when it said something that mattered. He couldn't even remember how he laughed. That was the strangest part. The small things were gone. All the tiny pieces that made him, him. A street musician played a song one day, and he froze. He didn't know the title, but it made his hands shake. His throat tightened. He almost cried. Something deep inside him responded, but no memory followed. Just emotion without a name. And every day that passed, he feared the truth more than the silence. What if the memories never came back? What if there was no one left to remember him at all? The breakthrough didn't come like a movie moment. No sudden lightning bolt. No dramatic gasp. Just a quiet afternoon in a library, flipping through old newspapers, killing time. A photo on the third page caught his eye. Not of a person, but a place. A diner with a red awning and chipped yellow letters. He didn't know how, but he'd been there before. He wrote down the address. It was in a small town 2 hours away. He took the next bus out, heart pounding the entire way. As the buildings passed by, something strange happened. His hands began to sweat, and his chest tightened, like he was approaching something that had once mattered. When he arrived, the diner was still there. Slightly faded, but the same. He stood across the street, staring at it, too afraid to go in. But his feet moved anyway. The bell above the door rang, and the smell of fried eggs and coffee hit him like a wave. A memory flickered, him laughing at a booth, holding a cup with chipped blue paint. The waitress looked at him twice. Her eyes narrowed. "You okay?" she asked, cautious. He nodded slowly, unsure. Later, he sat outside on a bench. A man approached. Middle-aged. Kind eyes. "You look familiar," he said. "Have we met?" That night, the man made a call. A week later, a social worker arrived with a file. Inside were records, photos, a name. His name. It had been over a year since the accident. He had been listed as missing, then presumed dead. His family had moved on. A funeral had been held. No one had come looking, because no one believed he was still alive. And now that he was found, the world he used to know wasn't waiting for him anymore. They told him his name, but it didn't feel real. It sounded distant, like a character in a story he had forgotten. They showed him photos. Him smiling, arms around people he didn't recognize. Birthdays, holidays, moments frozen in time. He studied them, searching for connection. But the emotions didn't come. Just a dull sense of confusion. He visited the address listed in the file. A quiet street, a small house with white shutters. Someone else lived there now. The new owners didn't know him, had never heard his name. The mailbox no longer bore the letters of his past. He met a cousin who had once been close. She smiled sadly, tears in her eyes. "We thought you were gone," she whispered. "We had no idea," he nodded, trying to feel something. But it was like meeting a stranger who held his memories instead of him. His parents had moved overseas. A message was sent, but there was no reply yet. His fiancée, she had married someone else. Her photo was in the file too, happy now, far away from the boy who disappeared. He walked the streets of his old life like a ghost. The stores, the sidewalks, the parks. All familiar, yet hollow. No one turned to look. No one stopped him. He was back, but not really. One night, he sat alone on a bench, the same one from a photo taken years ago. He looked at the city lights and whispered his name, just to hear how it sounded. It didn't feel like his. He had survived. That was true. But the world he once belonged to had already let go. Everyone who had known him, really known him, was gone. And all that remained was a man with a name that no longer felt like home. He stopped saying the name they gave him. Not out of anger, not even confusion, just emptiness. It didn't fit. It didn't carry the weight it was supposed to. It felt like he was wearing someone else's coat, too big in some places, too tight in others, and never quite his. He rented a small room above a bakery in a quiet town. The scent of bread each morning was the only familiar thing in his life, though he couldn't explain why. The landlord didn't ask questions. He liked that. He didn't have to pretend. He didn't have to be anyone. At the market, the cashier called him friend. At the cafe, the barista just smiled and said the usual. They didn't know his past. They didn't try to. And maybe that's why it felt comforting. He started using a new name. One he chose himself. One that meant something now, not before. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't special. But it was his. The first thing he'd claimed in a long time. A name that felt light and real in his mouth. It didn't carry a history, but it didn't have to. He began writing in that same notebook again. Not fragments this time, but pieces of who he was becoming. The way the rain fell at night. The rhythm of new routines. The silence that no longer felt like punishment. He smiled more. Not because he had answers, but because he was no longer chasing ghosts. He had stopped asking who he used to be. That person was gone, buried in wreckage and time. Now each day, he builds something new. One small moment at a time. Because sometimes survival isn't about returning to the life you had. It's about creating one that finally feels like your own.